South Korea and the U.S. hold joint drills after North Korea's launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile into the sea near Japan. You're watching Aljazeera live from our headquarters in Doha. I'm Darine Abougaida. Also ahead, funerals are held for the victims of a building fire in Gaza. At least 21 people were killed at a refugee camp. It's blast-off without the big bucks. India's first privately developed rocket takes off as the country aims to become a space power at low cost. Plus, a major U-turn for World Cup organizers. Alcohol won't be sold at stadiums during the tournament. Hello. The U.S. and South Korea have held joint Air Force drills hours after North Korea launched a ballistic missile that landed just 200 kilometers west of Japan. South Korean and American fighter jets flew in formation off the east coast of the Korean peninsula. The U.S. also held military drills with Japanese forces. Well, Tokyo says the North Korean intercontinental ballistic missile is capable of reaching the U.S. mainland. It also confirmed the missile landed in its exclusive economic zone about 200 kilometers from an island in northern Hokkaido. It's the latest in a series of launches by North Korea. This all comes as Asia-Pacific leaders hold trade talks at a summit in Thailand. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris gathered allies to condemn the launch. Tony Cheng reports from Bangkok.
Leaders from around the Asia-Pacific region gather for the opening of the APEC summit. At the top of the agenda, urgent economic issues facing their nations, hyperinflation and the looming recession. But as the news that North Korea had fired an intercontinental ballistic missile broke, the United States and its allies met to discuss what they called North Korea's provocations.
We strongly condemn these actions, and we again call for North Korea to stop further unlawful, destabilizing acts. On behalf of the United States, I reaffirm our ironclad commitment to our Indo-Pacific alliances.
The one leader who could exert considerable influence on North Korea is China's Xi Jinping. But if he was concerned about the missile, he was giving nothing away. On the other side of town, protesters tried to march to the summit venue, pushing back against police lines blocking their path. The police fired rubber bullets to force the crowds back. Several people were seriously injured.
We want the APEC leaders to know that we are drastically affected by the policy, and we want you to stop talking with the military junta.
Globalization, climate change, industrialization, a long list of grievances. And China's President Xi Jinping again, this time caricatured as the image of Pooh Bear.
The protests have kind of ground to a halt. Protesters are just stretched out along this street, sitting down, because they've been very effectively stopped by the police. These trucks parked across the road are an obstacle, then 8 rows of riot police and a lot more police in reserve. 30,000 drafted into the Thai capital.
But with the threat of more protests as the talks continue, the police have locked down the area around the summit venue. Tony Cheng, Al Jazeera, Bangkok.
A mass funeral has been held for 21 family members killed in a building fire in northern Gaza. 7 of those who died were children. The blaze engulfed the 3rd floor of a building in the Jabalia refugee camp. The occupants were holding a birthday party when the blaze broke out. Authorities are investigating the cause of the fire. Yimna Sayed reports from the funeral in Gaza.
Grief and sadness overshadow the Gaza Strip as thousands of people mourn the 21 people who have died of the Abu Rayya family. They gather here today to carry their bodies towards the Western Cemetery, where they will be buried. Thousands say that they are here to show support and solidarity to the family of these victims. They say that they want to be granted the honor of carrying their bodies and marching with them towards their burying place. Thousands here are saddened by this tragedy that has happened, taking 21 people of the same family in one night after a fire ate their entire apartment.
Ukraine says a barrage of Russian shells and missile attacks have targeted critical energy facilities across several regions, leaving millions of people in darkness and freezing temperatures. The new wave of strikes come as the capital, Kyiv, is seeing the season's first snow. Authorities say they're working to restore power nationwide as temperatures are expected to drop drastically. Meanwhile, the UN warns of a humanitarian emergency caused by power and water shortages. Let's bring in Esad Beg, who's standing by for us in Lviv in western Ukraine. Esad, tell us more.
Well, as you said, there's snowfall here, considerable here in Lviv. We've seen some people enjoying the snow, but with the snowfall in other parts of the country comes a great deal of concern. That's after one of the biggest missile barrages this country has faced since the start of the war. Now, Ukraine says Russia targeted its energy facilities. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says about 10 million people are without electricity, and one of the main electricity providers says that they're trying to keep the blackouts short and scheduled. Many people without electricity, many people without water, and as the temperatures drop, that's a real concern. But along with those missile strikes came controversy on Tuesday when a missile went over the border into Poland, hit a farm and killed 2 people. Now, the Ukrainians are sticking to their guns. They're adamant that that was a Russian missile, but that's not what we've heard from Poland, the United States and NATO, who say that it's unlikely that that missile was fired by Russia or Russia attacked Poland. It's more likely that it was a missile from the Ukrainian air defense. Now, we understand from the foreign ministry here that Ukrainian investigators are now part of that investigation. They are in Poland, and he said that they want to be open and transparent about this investigation. But again, we're still waiting for the results of that. But most countries now seem to think that it was unlikely that it was from Russia. Elsewhere in the country, in the Zaporizhzhia region, the death toll after Thursday's missile attack has gone up to 10. And sticking to Zaporizhzhia, that nuclear plant, the IAEA has passed its third resolution, again urging Russia to stop its actions against and at that nuclear plant. They say the Ukrainian staff continue to work there in conditions that they've described as putting their safety at risk. But the main concern at the moment are those energy shortages and the facilities that have been attacked. And as the winter approaches and the temperature drops, there's many people in this country without electricity or water.
All right, thank you so much. Esad Beg reporting from Lviv. Swedish and Danish investigators say there are traces of explosives near 2 underwater pipelines which started leaking in September. The Nord Stream 1 pipeline carries gas from Russia to Germany. Nord Stream 2 was set to open just before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but was then placed on hold. The explosion sent gas spewing into the Baltic Sea. They triggered 4 leaks at 4 locations, 2 in Denmark's exclusive economic zone and 2 in an economic zone controlled by Sweden. With just 2 days before the World Cup starts, organizers have announced that alcohol will not be sold at stadiums. Alexia O'Brien has more from the FIFA Fan Fest in Doha.
Right here, actually, I'm in the bar area where fans will be able to come and buy a Budweiser, who a major sponsor of FIFA. They have an agreement for exclusive sale of beer during the World Cup. It'll be about $15 per can. Now, this was all part of an alcohol policy that was agreed between the Qatari organisers of the World Cup and FIFA, but now just 2 days to go, FIFA has reversed that policy. Now, alcohol will still be available here for sale at fan zones like this one and at licensed venues around the country, but as you said, it will no longer be sold in the stadium perimeters. Well, Budweiser has said, as partners of FIFA for 3 decades, we look forward to celebrating football with consumers, even though some planned stadium activations, as they call them, will not be able to go ahead. Now, some fans have said they're really disappointed, inevitably, especially those who've bought tickets to travel here. Some of them already on the plane. Some of them had expectations about where they would be able to buy beer on game days. But I've also spoken to other locals here who say that they're happy that Qatar has held to its religious position positions, that priority has been given to Islamic culture and values. I also spoke with a marketing expert who said this may not be a bad thing for Budweiser, because there had been fears that this could complicate the relationship between Budweiser and FIFA and also the Qatari organisers. But this expert told me, look, here we are, we're all talking about Budweiser today. It's being talked about all around the world, so that's not a bad thing.
A football coach in Jakarta is changing the lives of young people from low-income households. Jessica Washington has the story.
Like many of his teammates, Ozil is looking forward to the World Cup.
Argentina, karena jagoan saya di.
I support Argentina because my favorite player is Messi. I don't have other favorites. I'm an Argentina supporter always.
The 10-year-old only started training last year, but already has big dreams of becoming a football star in his own right.
I want to play for the national team, so I need to practice a lot and I have to listen to my coach.
His coach is this man, Al-Ajri, known as Coach Aji by his students. For nearly 40 years, he has trained hundreds of children, offering free lessons for those from low-income households.
Saya sangat bangga, senang di hati.
I am very proud. My heart is happy. I have never regretted it or counted my losses and gains.
He even purchases boots and jerseys for Ozil and other students.
Football is one of Indonesia's most popular sports, but many families can't afford training. The efforts of coaches like Aji make the game more accessible for children from low-income households.
Some of his former students have made it into the national leagues, including Azra Zifa Kaila, who has travelled the world playing for the women's team.
Coach Aji doesn't see how rich or poor a person is, but he has talent. He will support him until he makes it.
She often visits her former coach to help train some of the new students. Coach Aji says he's proud of all of them, but turning them into professional players is not his main goal.
I want these children to play football so they can be strong and be confident, so they can have a good future. Nowadays, football schools are expensive, but I believe football should be cheap. Football belongs to the people.
He often dips into his savings to pay for equipment and hiring the field, a cost he says is worth it when he sees what his students can achieve. Jessica Washington, Aljazeera, Jakarta.
Britain's finance minister has defended his budget but warned the UK may face challenging times during the next 2 years. Jeremy Hunt says his $66 billion plan will lower inflation and boost the economy. The UK government will raise taxes and also cut spending. Rory Challens has an update from London.
The markets have been well prepared for what was going to be in Jeremy Hunt's autumn statement, so there was nothing there that actually disturbed them too much. Yes, there was a small drop in the pound, a small drop in stocks, but nothing too major. The same can't be said elsewhere, though. This is the horrified Daily Mail, which is usually a Conservative supporting newspaper. Tories soak the strive, as it says, calling it one of the most punishing budgets in modern history, and says that the British are now taxed at the highest level they have been since the Second World War. Now, voters are pretty fed up with the Conservatives. There is a real cost of living crisis in this country, and there have been months of economic turmoil. There has been a collapsing pound, soaring inflation and soaring interest rates. Recent polls have put the opposition Labour Party well in the lead, and it'll be interesting to see whether, when the next polls come out, this autumn statement has done anything to change their minds.
Voters in Malaysia head to the polls on Saturday. The Malay vote traditionally dominates elections as the ethnic group accounts for nearly 70% of the population. But political realignments mean more parties are competing for these votes than ever before. Florence Louis has more from Kuala Lumpur.
Zamzali Hussein is part of the majority in Malaysia. He's an ethnic Malay and a Muslim. In this multicultural nation, many still vote along racial and religious lines.
As a Muslim, I would like to vote for a party that defends my faith, champions the rights of Malays, and is able to manage the economy.
He says he'll also assess each candidate's capabilities. Malay votes like his are what each party is hoping to capture ahead of Saturday's general election. For the first time, Barisan Nasional, or the National Front, which has long dominated politics, will not be the only coalition that promotes Malay privileges. It has to compete with the National Alliance, made up of Malays-only party Bersatu and the Malaysian Islamic Party. Then there's the Alliance of Hope, seen as more multiracial and reform-minded. And finally, a new fringe party led by veteran politician Mahathir Mohamad.
You have four large coalitions now all competing for the Malay vote. No one seems more dominant than the other. The support levels seem to swing from one end to the other.
Many analysts anticipate this election to be the most competitive in Malaysia's history. It's also the first time all three major coalitions have had a stint in government prior to the polls.
A lot of Malay voters will start thinking about how having sort of a certain racial profile in government is not a guarantee to their lives improving. So those are instances where you will see encouraging signs of us moving away from race-based politics.
Increasingly, though, the younger generation is showing signs of departing from traditional voting patterns.
We live in a multiracial country. We can't afford to choose one particular race or religion to run the country.
At stake is political stability.
Malaysia has had 3 prime ministers since the last election 4 years ago. 2 administrations have collapsed because of infighting and defections. And with some surveys suggesting a parliament with no clear majority and a coalition government as a result, that stability may prove elusive. Florence Louis, Aljazeera, Kuala Lumpur.